I had a little brush up on your podcast. I had a quick listen earlier to a few of the episodes. It was really great.
Nice. Which ones, out of interest?
A friend, Beth, who is in a band called Litany, or she's got an artist called Litany, and she was telling me she was walking on a walk the other day with Black Honey.
Oh yeah, Izzy
from Black Honey, and they were talking about how appalling men in the music industry are and what they could do about it. So that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's fair.
But enough. Yeah, and so that I saw Black Honey was one of your interviewees, so I listened to that one a bit, and I listened to the Happy Meal Limited one, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. He was good though. They were one of the last shows I went to in like February last year or something, when they were on their tour, kind of before all this kicked off. Great band live.
I've actually never seen, which is a crime because we're very much of that kind of same crowd of people, and I've heard lots of good things about their live show.
Yeah, is that the kind of London scene type thing?
I guess you could call it a London scene. I guess there are some divisions in what you could possibly say was a scene in London. There's obviously the river dividing north and south. I don't know. To be honest, I'm quite isolated in that respect. I have some great friends who are musicians and are in the music industry and people I can kind of have conversations with, but I don't think that constitutes as a scene. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think many people could claim to be part of a scene, really, when you break it down. There's this venue in South London called the Windmill that houses a lot of different artists that seem to be kind of coming from the same. They seem to have the same tone, at least, in terms of, you know, a lot of that post-punk influenced stuff. Yeah, and
like your kind of Shames and Sports Team and stuff.
Your Shames and your Sports Teams. Although I think Sports Team are not South London. I think they're from Cambridge, or they went to Cambridge or something. Or I don't think they're quite the kind of Windmill South London thing that Shame are necessarily. And then there's obviously this, it's almost like the Fat White Family are the Zeus, the Thor of that, you know, the OG classics. And I can't claim to have ever have a few friends who live down there and will do shows at the Windmill and have been a sort of on the peripheries of that group of people, but I can't claim to know any of those people or really have much musical connection to that. Although I'm a fan of kind of post-punk and in the way that I'm sure they are with, you know, the Fall and so Gang of Four and that whole area of music that, you know, we all love so much. There's definitely a sort of a zeitgeist almost, it feels like, to be influenced by that music at the moment, which is not really something I'd be particularly interested in. So I feel a bit like not out in the cold there, but, you know, I don't feel like I would ever deign to be a part of that scene, you know, even though I spend plenty of time in South London and going to see those shows and stuff. As a band, we wouldn't be in any way appropriate.
I think that's kind of what you want, though. I was getting interviewed by someone else a few weeks ago, and they were asking about the way I kind of interact with the Scottish music scene. I was saying I kind of feel like it's a similar thing where I definitely interact with it a lot and communicate it, but I would never say that I'm a part of what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you can attempt to kind of create a scene in one sense. I think early on with Flyte, we tried a little bit to get artists together because we had a few, you know, friends and people, label mates and people like that who we thought were great people, and there was this venue called the Moth Club in Hackney where we all lived, and we put on a monthly night there called the Chasing Heaven Night. I don't know, it just didn't really take off. It was really fun, but they just were gigs. They just felt like there were shows with our friends on the lineup, and, you know, it didn't really feel like it amassed to much more, like, beyond that. And it's so funny, we had plenty of friends who were, you know, artists or actors and other musicians, and that's sort of how a scene should be formed in a way, like lots of creative people hanging out, and that is what was happening then. But it just didn't feel like it felt like maybe there was too disparate a genre going on, you know, that we weren't all sounding the same, for instance, you know.
Yeah, you played Palace's Night as well, didn't you? Back in the day, a few years ago. Yeah, I
did. Yeah, and that's just because Leo was a friend who I'd met many years before, and I remember him coming to my flat once. He was an actor then. I remember him coming to my flat and saying, "I'd really love to." At least he was pursuing acting professionally, and I think he decided to have to change the course of his his life in a way, because he'd had this band and he was just sort of sitting on it and thinking, shall I go for this? And I remember him coming to ask me, I'd only just started out, coming to ask me, if I had any advice. And I was like, oh, God, I don't have any fucking advice. I don't know what you sound like. You're a lovely person. I'm sure you're great. And then I think 6 months later or something, they suddenly were just doing incredibly well. So yeah, it's funny that with London, that you can make as many interactions as you like, but I guess unless you've got a windmill style venue, or the press come and cover you in a way and kind of say that you're a scene, then it feels like you're not quite seen.
That's another funny part of it, though, isn't it? The way that the kind of enemy or your dark or whatever still have this weird sort of power to some degree.
They do.
Not power, but they kind of, once they recognize it, it becomes a thing. It's
funny because I remember reading Enemy when I was at school, and I was a young teenager, and feeling like Enemy was this quite exciting and informative thing to read, and it was quite glamorous, and a friend of a friend's band ended up having a tiny little piece in the Enemy. You're like, oh my God, they've made it. But now it seems like not to do them down, and not to do the music press down in general, but like it just doesn't feel like printed press and even online press, blogs, etc., really have as much impact on what people decide to listen to. I suppose that, of course, because people are able to browse through music in so many different ways now.
I don't think they do, and I think things like your KEXP, your Audio Tree or whatever, these kind of live sessions that have sprung up, I think they've kind of taken the place of that.
Absolutely, because it's just a quick way of watching. You're not reading about some band via someone's opinion of them. You're just seeing what they're like instantly there and then.
Yeah, I remember hearing a quote once and it said, why would you take 10 minutes to read a review when you can listen to the song in 3? And it's like, yeah.
I love that. Well, I guess it's two different types of people, isn't it? Two different types of listener. Some people need to have an opinion. Some don't.
Yeah. I think the thing as well, when it comes to stuff like this, we live in an era now where the first time in history, really, the spoken word is kind of more powerful than the written word. And it still feels like the music press haven't really caught up to that fully yet, for some reason.
No, I mean, I did do Enemy or DIY or Dork or any of those people. Do they have podcasts? I suppose they probably do. Or maybe they don't.
Only Dork do, I think. DIY did, and then they shut it down for some reason.
Right. Well, it's down to you then.
Yeah.
And people like you.
I don't know if that's a wise... if I'm a wise person to put trust in.
I don't think anyone at the Enemy was a wise person to put trust in either, so,
No, I like that Matt Wilkinson guy, though, who does Beats One now.
Yeah,
I think he was the kind of chief editor there for a while, wasn't he?
Also, you're Scottish, you've got a trustworthy voice. Everyone likes a Scottish accent. Everyone's going to kind of buy whatever you say, no matter what.
I've noticed that with Americans, you always get the kind of comments from them or the messages or whatever, like, love the Scottish accent. I'm like, oh.
Can they understand it? I remember being in the UK, in the US, and they love an English accent, obviously, but even more so a kind of, a regional accent from England, or a Scottish accent, or a Welsh accent, or an Irish accent, because it's sort of, they want to somehow latch on to the side of the oppressed and say that they're from that side. Especially Scottish somehow, they all want to be Scottish. They've all seen Braveheart.
It's all about the heritage and the kind of family ancestry in America as well, isn't it? Because they can trace it back so directly. So everyone has like a fourth generation Italian or Scottish or Irish kind of ancestor. And so they have that kind of tangible connection to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully understand that that inclination, that need to do that too. It's almost like if you were an adopted child and you'd grown up with parents that weren't your biological parents, you'd be so fascinated to eventually find out. I have a friend whose dad was adopted, and she'll never know. They never know like where he's from, what his actual lineage is.
Yeah,
they've always speculated about it. My God, drank too much coffee, and that maybe is what it's like for Americans. They're kind of orphans in a way. They don't hail from a place that's got a couple of millennia of origin story going on. They have to pluck it from the old country.
There must be something kind of exciting about that as well, though. This kind of feeling of fresh opportunity, and you can kind of forge your own path in a more direct way.
Mm.
It's funny though, because you when we were chatting there, you made a reference to Fat White Family as, I think you call them the Zeus of the kind of that little scene.
Yeah.
And your photography account is called Mount Olympus.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a thing for Greek history? Are you kind of, not Greek history, but Greek myths? Is that kind of an area of interest for you?
Well, yeah. I wouldn't say it was sort of an area of obsession for me, because I definitely can get obsessed with stuff. I think everyone loves a bit of Greek mythology, don't they? I mean, I did read the Odyssey, when I was young, and some Virgil and stuff like that, and got into the deeper end of things at one point, but kind of forgot it all. But what really stuck with me was the early Greek myth, like children's books, because it just gives you everything. It just makes you realize, they were one of many civilizations, but one of the really early ones that just sort of mapped out all the creation myths in one go. They just covered everything. It's really almost like scientifically. I've been listening to the Stephen Fry, what's it called? Mythos, I think it's called.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've been listening to the audiobook of that, because I just miss him reading to me, because I can't really do Harry Potter anymore.
He used to narrate all them, didn't he?
He did, and it's funny when I'm listening to Mythos and Stephen Fry's narrating it, I keep thinking, God, Harry Potter, I don't remember this bit in Harry Potter, and I have to remind myself that I'm not actually listening to Harry Potter. But anyway, he's kind of putting a slant on it, I think, more so than stuff I've read before concerning Greek mythology stuff, where it's almost like they're kind of creating the foundation for a lot of scientific theory as well. There's a lot of linguistic links and sort of biological, and almost like there's almost physics in there. They had a lot of formative scientific stuff in their heads when they were putting these stories together.
Yeah, what you were saying there as well about the creation myths, and it kind of mapped them out. It kind of comes back to this idea of it's all maybe an innate thing, isn't it? This kind of inner search for some sort of higher power or whatever. Yeah,
and I definitely at one point a few years back got very fascinated with religion and origin, and I've forgotten the bloke's name now, but there was a really early kind of version of Jesus. I think it was an Egyptian god, or it was around the time of the Egyptian civilization, where it was a prophet, and he was born of a virgin, and his birthday was on the 25th of December, and he was crucified, and he was resurrected, all these things. And it's just like, wow, so we have this innate storytelling. We got this pattern that we repeat over and over again, and probably have done way earlier than we even can map it back to, where we just kept coming up with that same story over and over again. So there's obviously this sort of biological urge inside of us and I think it's dictated a lot by the stars and the moon. I think we were mapping things out with the stars when we were not settling as early man. So I think maybe the ideas, all our fiction came from that initially, or something. I don't know, but I definitely got really not anti-God in a way, but just really
once you start to unravel it.
You start to unravel it, and you just go. I mean, I was raised in quite an atheist sort of household anyway. With my dad, when I lived with my dad, and he was a kind of Shakespearean English teacher. And he taught at a college, and I remember him always being really annoyed and resentful of the fact that there had to be church involved with it, and so I kind of had that in my veins a little bit. But you read a little bit of Daniel Dennett, or a bit of Christopher Hitchens or something like that, and you kind of go, oh God, there's a lot of vitriol against this sort of this anti-religious thing, which I definitely didn't get that on board with. But it is such a fascinating thing to dig into, isn't it?
Yeah, I hadn't heard what you were just saying there as well about the Egyptian guy who basically has the same story. That's interesting, because I'd always presumed Jesus to have been a real person, but his story had kind of just been accentuated and exaggerated a little bit. But if what you're saying there is true, that almost implies that he probably wasn't even really a thing. It's probably just a regurgitated myth. Yeah,
perhaps, or maybe we projected that story onto this Jesus guy, or I don't know, maybe it's true. That lovely thing that the only conclusion you can come to is just, I don't know, I don't fucking know, and you definitely don't. So, let's have a nice chat about it and try not to come to any definite conclusions.
Yeah, it's more interesting that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, music. Oh, and the segue that you were trying to do there was to talk about my photography account.
Well, it's interesting to look at what we've just been speaking about, like you said, though, in the context of music, and that. Do you ever notice that with your own songwriting? Do you notice kind of repeated patterns and stories coming back, or even characters, because you're dealing with characters on this record in a slightly different way. Can you see them relating into a way that you've approached certain people before and certain ideas before?
I think the only repeating character is me, really, because I think any... and so I'm going to sort of talk on behalf of the guys too, because, you know, they're a really big part of the writing process. Although I think it's fair to... I think they would say I'm probably the lyricist in the band, I guess. But yeah, I think even though we do sing a lot about other people's stories and we'll be very explicit in taking on someone else's narrative. Certainly in the first album we did that a great deal. I realized kind of in hindsight always that I just projected my own story onto that story, you know, and just said they and you, and you know, just took the intimacy away and took it off my table and put it on someone else's. But this new album that's coming out, I think I tried very hard to not do that, and it's really just me and I and you, and it's very personal, and I didn't want to try and offload my shit onto some fictional thing, you know.
Do you feel less vulnerable when you do what you did on the first album, where you kind of take your story and dress it up in someone else's in a kind of way? Yeah,
I think so. I think I really look. I love that first album we did. I don't have that thing where, you know, you look back and you shudder at your old work, and I mean, although I do a little bit. I listened to that album for the first time in years, actually, not that long ago, and my thought was, Christ, we put a lot of work into that album. I can hear how much effort we put in, and then we did. And in a way, I think my like current taste at the moment would maybe, I'd much rather hear something that had less work put into it, you know, and was much simpler and more, I guess, spontaneous feeling, or at least had the illusion of that. I want to hear the illusion of spontaneity and rawness. But yeah, I do think we were using it as a bit of a blanket, a little bit of a wall to hide behind, you know, other people's stories, lots of production, lots of parts, lots of cleverness. I think we've stepped in the right direction with this new album, and I want to do that even more on the next one that we're sort of starting to make now, which is just to be just completely unfiltered and, you know, and raw and naked, like properly laid bare.
Yeah. Is that a progression though? Like, do you think you could have made this album without doing the first one? Do you have to kind of become accustomed to being a songwriter and putting yourself on display in a slightly less vulnerable way first before you can do it with full conviction on this new record?
Totally, yeah. It's like having training wheels on, you know, having the bumpers up when you're bowling, maybe on the first album a little bit, and using the studio to be those bumpers. You know, we're actually demoing some new material at the moment, and to do that, we're actually using a cassette recorder that's just got 2 channels on it, so that we can't escape into the computer. We can't use plugins, you know, effects and all that kind of stuff. We have to just boil everything down to 2 tracks, and that really, really extreme version of limitation early on is actually, I'm finding, really, really helpful and really healthy, because it stops you from procrastinating on a track. It stops you from letting something get carried away. My worry would be that, you know, that stops you from being able to explore and create all this extra color that you might be able to do if you had more tools at, you know, your exposure, more tools to kind of, you know, not get caught up on EQs and detail and stuff, but, you know, go, oh, there's this new sound, this is an exciting avenue we could quickly go down. It's not like that. It's actually, it just makes you realize there are loads of exciting avenues we can do just here in the room with our faces and our fingers. And, you know, there's loads of toys in this room. There's plenty of knobs to twiddle and shit like that. You know, in this studio, there's plenty to do. You don't have to go on the computer at all. In fact, I think that no screens are allowed in the studio at the moment, you know, not even phones. And I'm finding that way more liberating creatively than, you know, something like Logic, which is kind of infinite in terms of how much stuff you can do. And therefore, you do nothing.
That's funny, because I was speaking to Izzy, we were saying at the start of this on a few weeks ago, whatever, and she said exactly the same thing.
Really?
So they've kind of moved to a more stripped back form of recording because she doesn't want to have to deal with screens in the studio.
Right. Well,
just wants them out, yeah.
I see you, Izzy, and I'm with you. Solidarity.
With what you were saying about doing that, where you kind of put the restraint before you go into the writing process and that you're doing it on this recording and the limitations are there. How did that function for this album that's just coming out? Did you have to do it in a more conscious way throughout the process to keep it kind of more stripped down? Does that allow you to take your mind off it, when you put it in from the get-go?
I didn't need to trick myself creatively into anything on this last album, because I really had to make this album because it was a very personal one for me. There's quite a big relationship had come to an end. It was very dramatic and it hit me very hard. And when this album, this is really going to hurt. It was written all in that time, in a very short period of time. And I really didn't think about it. I just kind of felt it. And that's the first time for me as a writer, and I've written since I was 12 years old. It's the first time that's ever actually happened to me, that it's just come out fast and unthinking and like it had to happen kind of thing.
Does that change the catharsis of it? Does it kind of hit you all in the one go as a result of that?
No, it was a long, drawn-out, painful process even after finishing the writing. I mean, I think, we all know that it doesn't just stop with when you've written the song. You then have to demo the song, you have to play it to people, you have to listen to it back, you have to ponder it, you have to take it to a studio and try it out and, work with a producer, and then you have to get it mixed and then maybe mixed again, and then you have to master it, and then you have to think about it for the music video, and and normally at that point, somewhere along that line, I'd completely forget what the song was about, and it wouldn't really have much of an emotional impact on me, But these songs, they just keep bringing me back to that place, and I have to say it's been quite an unpleasant experience really working on this album, just because it just keeps pinging me back to that really dark spot I was in when I was making the album. I'm looking forward to April 9th when it comes out, because it's almost like maybe then I'll be free of it.
Do you think there's an event that could happen that would kind of give you power over that time and you would be able to kind of have control over it, or is it always going to affect you in some way?
Perhaps. I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question, and time will tell, I guess. I know that when I've felt like I've come full circle with a song in the past, it's because it's been released and people have had time to listen to it and take it in, and then we've done a great show and there's been a great audience and they've been singing the song back to us, and I kind of, in that moment, in a way, I can kind of let go, and I'm like, oh, okay, these people kind of, because you can see people are listening to it online or whatever, and you can see that people are buying the record maybe, or even commenting underneath saying something nice, but you don't really feel it until you see a big crowd of people singing a song back at you, and you go, oh, okay, this isn't my song anymore, it's theirs. I'm here to facilitate their ownership of it in this moment. So maybe when that happens with this new record, maybe then there will be that catharsis, as you say.
Do the moments you latch onto change when that happens? Like, do people kind of catch onto a moment that you wouldn't see, that you maybe wouldn't have when you were in the process? Do the moments that really hit change?
You mean like maybe they kind of reimagine the song and change its meaning?
Almost. Like if there's perhaps like a certain section of it that maybe wasn't, one of the main sections for you that really hit you hard in the studio, but then when that happens in a live setting, it seems to be the one that people really latch onto.
Yeah.
Does the song ever shift in that way?
It can do, for sure. Or maybe a song that wasn't maybe your favourite, you start to like it a lot more because you see that is some people's favourite and they really like it. You definitely lose perspective on a song fairly quickly, and you kind of have to rely on other people telling you they think it's good for you to think it's good. Do you know what I mean? I think people lie when artists where they're like, I don't read reviews, or I don't listen to what other people say about my music, and if I did, I wouldn't take it in. I think they're all full of shit, because you have no clue what your thing you've made is, not long after you've made it, and so you absolutely have to rely on other people's
Who do you believe?
gaze. Who do you believe? I mean, you believe, I guess, a globulous mass, because if just your mum really likes that song, but no one else really says anything, then maybe that's just a mum thing. But then you do realize what's working after a certain amount of time, because you go, oh, okay, this is the one that people all seem to be listening to.
Yeah, I had Carlos, who used to play in Interpol, on the podcast a wee while back.
Oh wow!
And we were talking about how at the center of every kind of creative pursuit or creative project, there seems to be a question that you're trying to kind of answer. What do you feel the question was at the heart of the kind of creative process where this is really going to hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it slightly differently in my case of, and we've done this before, and we've said this before, is that, you have to, and you don't realize this straight away, but you have to realize at some point making an album what the hell the point of the album is. Like, why are you making an album? I don't think, sometimes there may be a band or an artist that is just a brilliant artist, and it doesn't really matter what the content of the material is. You just want to hear them sing, or you just want to hear them make that sound, or be that band, or be that artist, or look that way, or just repeat that same formula over and over again, maybe 10 times over, and there you've got an album, and that's enough. It doesn't really matter what it's about. But I think, well, certainly we have, and so many of the albums I love, they just have such a clear vision and such a clear point, and such a specific reason for existing. And when you start making an album, I think initially you're just like, okay, what songs have we got on the table here? How much more do we need to write before we've got an album? How do we change it up? You start with just some basic shit. I don't think we've ever sat down and gone, right, okay, this one's going to be about death. We're going to make a whole album about death. Let's go. You have to figure it out as you go. But there's a point in which, maybe halfway in, maybe a quarter of the way in, maybe 90% of the way there, you suddenly realize, oh, this is what the fucking album's about. This is a breakup album, or, oh, this album's about joy, or this is about England, or this is about COVID. You suddenly realize it's about something, or this is about alienation, or OK Computer. Perfect example. It's so much about one thing somehow. Even though maybe if you break it down, it's probably flitting off in lots of different directions. You get such a strong impression that the album's about, the alienation of, the modern age as it creeps up on you. And I don't know, I think what was nice about This Is Really Gonna Hurt was that we realized really early on, like we kind of knew straight away, oh, this is what this is about. This is about getting through your breakup. And even more so than that, as we went along, we realized we were kind of covering almost chronologically all the different stages of a breakup too. The really dark moment right at the beginning, and as it evolves, you're getting this sort of resolution slowly coming towards you, but whilst that's happening, you're getting these horrible cocktails of, jealousy and sadness and resentment and fear and loneliness. It's all coming at you slowly and gradually, and as that's happening, the songs are forming. So we realized this album actually almost was a sort of concept album of breaking up, and we actually put the tracks as they were written in chronological order.
It's interesting to think about chronologically then, because another slight tangent, I was reading an interview with Alfred Hitchcock the other day, and he was talking about Psycho and how the most violent act in the film is the shower scene that comes a third of the way in. And after that, for the rest of the film, that's kind of in the audience's mind, in their subconscious. And that's why you don't need anything as violent again. Is that the same with an album? Can you feel the weight of the really dark tracks, throughout, even after they've been? If you think about something like Under the Skin, do you feel the weight of that song for the rest of the album afterwards?
Yeah, I love that analogy. I wouldn't make the connection between that and Psycho, because, as you say, it's just got that one act of violence, and then the rest you just sort of, you're living in the embers of that moment, and we just keep the act of violence going from start to finish. It's only towards the kind of the final little closing few tracks that it really starts to abate. But yeah, I like that. That's true, and in a way, Under the Skin, it's a very big explosive moment. And then what follows is Everyone's a Winner, which is very, which is kind of like wading through the desolation of that explosion. So I like that they do kind of talk to each other, the songs.
Everyone's a Winner is still pretty dark as well, because you've got...
Yeah.
What's the line? It's like, everything's forever except... And then you kind of list up a bunch
except
of...
the dog in the chair. Yeah, my fucking dog. Oh, mate. And the bedroom that we share, and the friends who must choose which one of us they want to lose. Yeah, it's really explicit, that song, maybe more than the others. It just doesn't try to be poetic in any way. It's just sort of just bald-faced misery.
You could kind of look at them as the moments of violence if we're going on with that metaphor, though. The moments in the album when you do kind of just step out with the kind of usual poetry of your lyrics and just say something straight up. There's another one, you probably know the one I mean. I think it's, you strip me of everything. I hate you, I really do. It's another moment like that where you're just, the guard's completely down and you're just letting it out.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a school of thought I've had, and we've all kind of agreed on for a while actually with the lyric side of things, is that I guess they're like, well, you can be as poncy and poetic as you like, run off and do all that, but I don't know, here's it in practice. Like, I'm just going to try and write a shit lyric now in front of you, but like, choose a room maybe you've been in and picture what the color of the curtains were, and and what music was playing in the background, and what city you're in. Those aspects. There's a verse. You can paint all those details in a verse, and then you can say, and I never really loved you. You can just say that in amidst all that detail. You know what I mean? And then suddenly it's just so powerful because you're in a place, you're in a real place, and it could even be imagined. But just to say that line on its own is might be powerful, but it's not going to be enough. If you just give people that detail, you put them in a room and then you say that line, then suddenly it's poetry, if you know what I mean. But really all you're doing is saying blank verse. It's just
which comes first?
I think probably the intention. So what you're wanting to say, like what was said in that room, or maybe it all comes together, or or maybe I'm full of shit. Maybe, I don't know, it all comes out by accident, or it comes really slowly and arduously. It all totally depends. But that's an interesting tactic to use, and I think that's something that Losing You does. It really says a lot of very specific detail. I can remember I definitely can go straight back to all those places I was feeling those things, because I really explicitly explained the light in the hallway and that hotel, and it was by the river, and it was in the city, and all these specific things. And then if you say enough of that stuff, eventually you can get away with saying, you strip me of everything and I hate you, I really do. You know what I mean? It's just it can be as simple as that.
The whole song is almost kind of building up to that moment. You're exactly. Kind of teeing us up.
And that's, and in a way, that's an unacceptable lyric that I would feel I wouldn't necessarily, if someone else had sung that lyric, I'd be like, okay, you want to say that line? Okay, sure. It's a little bit brash, but it's like if you can earn it, I guess, by like building up to it. There's another song on the album where the title of the song is "Love is an accident waiting to happen," and I just thought, God, that is a really gross shit lyric. That's so corny, but at the same time, that's kind of great. I don't think anyone's ever said that before, and so the whole time I was just like, right, how can we like earn that line? It's almost like "Keep on Rocking in the Free World," Neil Young. That's an awful, horrible line, but it's fucking great because he actually is talking, about these really visceral, brutal topics in the verse, and then he sings "Keep on Rocking the Free World," and suddenly you're like, oh, that's a great line.
It's all about context. There could be a sweetness about that song as well, though. Love is an accident. Because you could also look at it as like falling into love, as opposed to love being an inevitable car crash.
Yeah, and that's why it comes a little later in the album, because it is very much post a breakup, and it's kind of, I think it's coupled with Trying to Break Your Heart, which is actually a really similar sentiment, which is it's basically someone saying, you don't want to muck in with me right now, it's just going to end badly. It's like a warning to future partners.
Yeah. What were we saying about the little details as well, though? That's something that kind of crops up in your photography too.
Oh yeah.
Like, you seem to have this eye for these little kind of moments that encapsulate something. Does dealing with them in your art enable you to kind of perceive them differently when they're happening, and you're kind of looking out for them?
I don't know. I mean, I love that you're talking about my pictures. I just do them for fun. I didn't realize anyone ever actually saw them. But I love taking. I always have loved taking pictures, and I love. Film is a huge passion of mine. I remember early on reading about Stanley Kubrick and how he was a photographer before he was a filmmaker, and he. Yeah, I really have been obsessed with cinematography and photography and framing a moment in a specific way, and how you frame an image is everything. How zoomed in do you go on that foot, or someone's eye, or like how if the person is placed to the left side of that frame, where now they belong differently in the story, or all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I guess there maybe I haven't thought about it, but yeah, maybe there's a direct link there to how I'd like to write lyrics too. Just detail, and simple, clear and simple.
I think it's interesting to look at a form of art that you also do where you're not putting pressure on yourself, because that's when you kind of get the true expression.
Yeah.
And then when you search for that in the art that you're thinking about a lot, you can kind of see where it's coming from a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Sense? Yeah. I mean, maybe that's why I enjoy doing it so much. It's just something I don't really think about. And obviously music being my kind of quote unquote profession, you do have to put a lot of thought and effort into it. And with photography, it's just like a nice hobby for me. So I think, if I think about the pictures of mine I've taken that I like and I will post up, they're normally the ones that have very little in them. There's normally power of 2 or power of 3 and never anything more than that. Anything gets too busy, I get quite upset. And that is very much how we do the songs. They have to be very, very almost Doric, kind of to the point, very blocky. And I don't ever want them to meander off in too many different directions. I want it to be very, very clear what this one song is and what it's trying to be. And then, if you want to try something else, try it on a different song. But
do you ever have to reel yourself back in? Do you feel yourself kind of going down the rabbit hole and think, no, I've kind of got to pull myself back in?
Definitely in the past. Definitely in the past. I think, and as a group of people, we would goad each other down the rabbit hole. We created quite a warren for ourselves in the past. I think in recent times we've really understood. I think just getting older and getting like a little bit more experience, we've just realized what we are and what we're after and how to do it. Not that we've like cracked any formula or anything, but we definitely have saved ourselves a lot of time in the last few years just by cutting to the chase. Which is, I guess, why I listened to The Loved Ones the other day and was just like, oh, God, we were just trying to just cover so much ground. No wonder we nearly lost our minds making that album.
Was this album a less stressful process or stressful in a different way?
No, it wasn't stressful at all. It was just a lot of fun because the funny thing is writing it was obviously stressful, although I wouldn't say it was stressful. I just say it was just sad. And actually making the songs was really fun because we'd been on a long tour across America. It's like the first time we'd done a really big, long American tour, and we were just having a lot. I think it was really helping me get over everything, and I was just having a fun time again all of a sudden. And from that we realized that America was a nice new chapter for us, or that we felt different and we felt new and clean when we were over there. And so we went at the beginning of last year to LA and recorded the album there. So we were having a really fun, sunshiny, nice time, which actually was kind of a good contrast to the misery of the content of the album, because the album in its essence really belonged in miserable, rainy, depressing London. And we'd taken it to this sunny, lovely spot in California, and we were having a really nice time. And I like that. I can hear that actually, especially in the second half of the record. I can hear us having a lot of fun, and we had some guest players. The guy from My Morning Jacket came, played piano on Trying to Break Your Heart, and the guy from Beirut played the trumpet solo at the end of There's a Woman. And there were just a few nice little moments. It just felt like we were just letting off some steam finally and having a fun time after, years of just quite like nose to the grindstone, paranoid, anxiety-ridden creativity. We finally were having a fun time, and it took a horrible breakup to do that, I guess.
It's interesting. We spoke a little bit about the chronology as well and how you assembled it, chronologically. The song I've Got a Girl, which kind of tackles a different sort of breakup, was that kind of happening in the midst of the other bigger breakup? Yeah,
it was. So it was a real double whammy. It was a really hard time for us. We'd lost Sam as a friend and as a band member. He really kind of went off grid. My relationship had ended just not long after, and John had lost his dad, and it was just and was also going through a breakup. It was a horrible time, and I look at pictures of us from that time. I think it was like a summer tour we were doing, and it was when we had Jess from the Staves filling in for Sam, which was a nice experience playing with her. But I just look at pictures of us then, and we just all looked so tired and upset. And Jess and her sisters had a really difficult time too, actually. So it's actually no wonder we'd found each other at that time. But yeah, the I've Got a Girl was very much about Sam leaving the band. and good for a second to leave the romantic sphere of breaking up and talk about breaking up with a friend for a second.
That's quite depressing though, isn't it? That you feel like you need to get out of the kind of other breakup, and so you turn to another one.
Go to another one. But interesting, that track, because it's a breakup that we all shared. You know, it wasn't my friends, you know, having my back for my thing. It was all of us together sharing in this breakup. And, you know, I think you can hear us. We got quite... we were working on another song, I think, and it wasn't working for us, and we were quite frustrated. And I think we just had a drink, and I think maybe we had a smoke. So we were quite pissed and stoned, and it was very late at night. And we got back in the studio, and we had this song sitting around, and we just, I think we just really bashed that one out quickly and had a fun time doing it. And it was like, hey, we don't need Sam. This was good. This is a good fun time. So that was a really nice bit of catharsis in the moment, actually.
It feels a lot more visceral than a lot of the other songs in the album. It's very in the moment.
Yeah, and I think maybe for the reason I just gave you, maybe it was the environment we were in when we were making it. But we actually took that song to LA, having started it in England, and did some extra work on it with Justin Raisin, who's a great producer. And I don't know how much we kept from that session, but he definitely rejuvenated it for us, just gave it that extra little bit of colour. There's a really big fuzz guitar, which I remember thinking was like, that seems a bit inappropriate. But we put it on, and it was just a big fuzz guitar, and it really lends this big oomph to the front of the bar. Because it's like a boom, da, 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 boom, da, boom, da, 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 da. It's like a slightly funny time signature. So to accentuate that time signature on the downbeat with this big shoom, da, 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 fuzz guitar,
changes the momentum of it.
It pushes a lot of the momentum in that way. And I think we had other parts in there that were shifting the momentum and giving you different options for, you know, where the front of the bar lands. And Andrew Sarlo, who was mixing the album, I remember him just muting pretty much everything and just leaving it down to those core elements and being like, no, it all falls on the one like that. It feels like a big, just heavy elephant just kind of clumping forward. Yeah. So you know, lots of extra influence after that. But yeah, I think there's an essence, there's a core in that song that, it just feels, visceral, as you put it. It's a good word to use.
At what point did you kind of settle into the new dynamic following that departure? At what point did you manage to get back into, because I imagine it's a different groove now as opposed to previously.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I actually prefer being in a 3-piece to a 4-piece. I think there's more room for everyone. Sam was a piano player, like, first and foremost, and he would, piano takes up a lot of room. It doesn't leave a lot of breathing space. And so if you take that out, take keys out of the equation, you even take the extra voice out, it just makes you, it gives you more space, and it kind of forces you to be more creative with what you've got on the table. And it's funny, like John and Nick and I, we go back to when we were children. You know, we've known each other most of our lives. And Sam actually was he was the first, he was the last one to join, first one to leave, I suppose, in that sense. You know, we met him in London, and he brought in a really interesting, different dynamic. But him leaving actually it did kind of just make us kind of go, oh God, we are just this unbreakable bond here. This is not going anywhere. Yeah, it really strengthened things up. It wasn't too much of it certainly didn't feel like a creative blow, and actually psychologically it felt like a bit of a relief, because I think when someone wants to leave a situation, you can really feel it from them, can't you? It's like, yeah, and like if someone wants to break up with you, you know, you can feel it a few months before, maybe a few years before that it actually happens, and it's always just a bit of a relief when it does finally happen, because it's just like, oh well, at least I haven't got that tension. Does
the tension go straight away, or does it kind of fade away gradually?
Well, it felt like it did for us. If it didn't feel like there wasn't a moment where we were like, fuck, what are we going to do? We're buggered. It didn't feel like that. It just kind of felt like a bit of a relief, actually, even though it was a bit annoying.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because you've obviously got a lot of happy memories there, but there comes a point when if it's been going down that kind of path for a while, by the time it actually gets to the event, it does feel like, you say, a relief. It's weird. Yeah,
and you know what's the funny one about that, actually? The White Roses EP, which we put out in 2019, that was when he was leaving. He was kind of foot out the door then, and there were 3 tracks on that EP that we did whilst he was with us, even though we kind of finished them off after he'd left. But there's a 4th track on there called Sometimes, and that track for me is my favorite on that EP, because it's actually the sound of it's the first thing we made after he'd just left, and we put it together super fast, and it actually sounds like a lot more where we've gone to.
You get that feeling of kind of uncharted territory as well, don't you? And you only get that once.
Yeah, you do.
Or with that specific experience.
Yeah, before you start kind of getting used to whatever the new thing is. For sure. I think we were just at the end of a relationship together. And I think when things are at the end, there's just that little moment where things are feeling a bit tired. And so it's that you get a little bit of a springboard onto whatever the new thing is, because you're excited to suddenly not be in that place anymore. But yeah.
With the fact that the album, concerns these two breakups, a lot of it almost feels like it's writing at something or at someone. If you know what I mean, it's directed towards someone, the emotions of it. Is it easier to channel them if you are writing at something in that way? And you have something to kind of focus them on and channel them toward?
I think that's just kind of the way it naturally came out. But you know what? I think more often than not, when it's being channeled at someone, it's normally being channeled at myself. That may have just been a bit of a poetic license thing where I maybe was just like, I think it's not actually that enjoyable listening to someone berate themselves. Do you know what I mean? I'm this, I'm crap. And a song is maybe better than, not that you're pointing that in another direction either, but it's interesting bringing someone else into the equation and like offloading stuff on a second party and kind of putting it back on you and having somewhere to go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes back to the idea we were speaking about as well with the first record, where you would write about yourself through other people.
Yeah.
Similar kind of strategy.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. I think I got 90% of the way there in terms of being able to really be brave enough to completely put it all on myself. I'm hoping that 100% will be on the next record.
When you have such a weight upon the lyrics, the lyrics have arrived kind of fully formed, or do you sculpt them over time? Before we kind of get into this next bit,
I'm a real sculptor. I love to. Sometimes the words come out fast. Sometimes they come out slowly. But if they come out fast, I normally like to tinker around a little bit, do a few extra layers of paint.
Are you the same with melody? Can you sculpt that, or does it have to arrive fully formed?
Yeah, no, we do a lot of sculpting across the board with everything. We leave no stone unturned. I really enjoy that process. I find it quite quite soothing, almost. I mean, the guys are great at just coming up with some instantly pleasing things. But naturally, as you play round and round a song, things will just evolve and eventually set. But there's that nice kind of exciting moment where things are yet to set, and there's still opportunities to be like, oh, what happens if you just shift that inversion there, or what if we change the key, or let's see what it's like really slow or really fast, or just trying out stuff because it's fun.
When you're sculpting in that way, does it feel like you're completely in control and you're the one moving it, or are you almost chasing something or trying to reel something in?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Depends how deep the water you're in is. Whenever you can, put yourself in the deepest water possible, because the best stuff is often found when you're really out of your comfort zone. I mean, that's such a cliche to say that. It's been said so many times before, but it's true. Definitely put yourself in, sometimes we'll swap around instruments, put John on the bass or guitar or piano or something, and Nick will go on the drums, and suddenly we're being challenged in a way, I think I read somewhere that REM did that on one of their really big albums. They all just swapped instruments. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. And obviously that creates, everyone's got a different view all of a sudden.
Yeah. When you return back to your own instrument, is it different as well because you've had that perspective from someone else's point of view?
Yeah, or you might go back to your own instrument to play the part that someone's just written for you, and then you learn something from them because they've written something in a way you wouldn't have. It's a really good exercise for any bands listening. That's always advisable.
I imagine it strengthens the kind of chemistry between you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. The only time we ever have tension between us, if we do, which isn't that often, is because we've not been playing together. And the minute we are playing together, it just all goes away because it's just that language we can, because we're ultimately emotionally stunted, guys.
Do you think that's what brought you together, though? The fact that you can communicate together in that space in a way that you really can with, yeah.
Yeah, because we met when we were little kids, and you don't really talk about anything when you're little kids, not of any particular substance. You just want to watch fucking Saw or play a computer game, or shoot BB guns in each other's faces. And for us, it was like figuring out how to play these instruments and figuring out how to write. When I think back to how young we were, and we were writing a lot of music together, 13, 14, I think we were making our own little crappy albums after school and stuff. And that's a really nice formative way of making friends with people at that age. Teenage friendships is having a medium like music to actually forge those friendships. So funnily enough, now we're kind of adults, I suppose we could call ourselves that. We still have that, that's not changed. If we didn't play music together, I'm sure we would still be friends, but would we? Because that's how we're friends.
Yeah. Do you keep in touch with anyone else from school?
No.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't.
I don't keep in touch with anyone else from school because the minute I started being in a band, I just sort of stopped being friends with everyone and just like, I'm in a band now. That's what I do. I just fell in love with it so much. I think everyone was just like, oh God, I think he's a bit one track at the moment. I don't think it's worth hanging about being friends with him anymore.
I think that's a fulfillment that very few people manage to find though. And even if when you're starting to navigate it, it can be tough, long term, much more of a net positive than it is a net negative. Even if it maybe impacts your life in a bit of a kind of brutal way when it first comes in and you're obsessed with it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my only worry about that is that, here we go as well. Like, do we actually talk about things in an emotional way to each other? Or are we, I wouldn't say we are, like in real life, very articulate with each other about how we're feeling. Because we've learned to do it through the music instead. So in real life, actually, when it comes to it, we're quite crap.
Do you think you need to, though, if you can do it through the music?
No, perhaps not. Although it might make it easier to make the music, get straight to the point if we've actually been able to discuss it beforehand. But maybe that would be a waste, Maybe if we'd actually got it all out and talked about how we felt to each other in the pub or whatever, then it would have all dissipated there in that pub. We wouldn't be able to take it back to the studio.
Yeah, you're kind of cutting off part of the process.
Yeah, exactly.
You're cutting off the release.
Save it for the music. Shut up. Get pissed and shut up.
It's funny you mentioned that you started off at like 13, 14 or whatever and you were already writing songs, because Never Get to Heaven, you were kind of age 14 when that first came out, right? Or you first started working on that idea?
It never came out, not until now.
No, it came out, sorry, I mean it came out of you.
Oh, I see, yeah. Came out of my face. It was, I was about 14. Yeah, I remember I was about that age because I think I'd gone on holiday with my girlfriend and her family to Devon. I think in my head, I didn't even say it out loud, but we were like lost trying to get there or something. And I was singing, "You'll never get to Devon," and da-da-da-da. In my head. I thought it was quite funny. I was like, why am I singing that? And it reminded me that there was this song that we sang that I'd sang like in my brief time in the Scouts. I don't think it was even Scouts. I think it was called Beavers.
Nice. Kind of like ages 5 to 8.
Yeah, exactly. Like super young. And I just remember that being one of these campfire songs, "You'll Never Get to Heaven." And then I just kind of started singing that around in my head. But yeah, I remember that song coming there and then on that holiday. I think maybe being a bit bored hanging out with my girlfriend's parents.
Do you record it at that point?
No, I don't think I would have had the means of recording it because I didn't have a phone with an iPhone memo on, and I hadn't brought like a little demoing rig with me. So I think I must have been singing it around in my head and just remembering it. Fucking hell, can you imagine that?
That would drive you insane.
Carrying something in your brain without putting it down. I mean, like, I don't know how people before voice memos ever remembered or wrote a song.
I think McCartney used to say that though, didn't he? That he would, if it was a good idea, he would just remember it. But then no, that must be bullshit, because didn't he have to write down yesterday as soon as he came up with it?
Yeah, I mean, he must have forgotten a lot of really great shit as well, probably.
That's a good point.
Bet we'd have a lot more
good Beatles music.
Great stuff out there if they had iPhones.
I mean, if there's one thing to be said about the Beatles, they don't have enough good songs, if you ask me.
I know, well, they were a bit light, weren't they? Yeah, they nearly had a good body of work, but they just
fell a little bit short.
And missed it. Yeah, fell a little short. Oh God, we could talk. We've been asked to go on a podcast that where you just talk about one thing, like one of your big inspiration thing, and I was like, oh, fuck, I don't know what that's going to be, and I was like, oh, it can't be the Beatles, but if it was, it would be great. I'd love to talk for hours about the Beatles.
Wait, so did they give you the topic?
No, you got to fucking pick it yourself.
Go Wings, go a little bit alternative.
Yeah, only the band the Beatles could have been. No, I'm gonna go for something hoity-toity, some book or something, film. Yeah, but I bet there are Beatles podcasts out there where I could get really indulgent.
Hop on, yeah.
Or maybe we just wasted a lot. We've wasted a full hour here talking about my stupid album. We should have just been talking about the Beatles the whole time.
Well, to come back to Never Get to Heaven quickly though, how did you actually get that down though? Like, how did you keep a hold of it for the last 10 years or whatever?
Well, I mean, I did eventually get home from that holiday, and I think I recorded it in some way or another. I think my dad had a copy of it because I played it. I don't know. I'd done some rudimentary recording of it basically, and I think because my dad was an English teacher, and he had this class he would really embarrassingly play a lot of my music to, like when they were coming in, he'd be like, "This is my son's band," and as embarrassing and like harrowing as that is, funnily enough, now like all the way down the line, I bump into people, or people come to my shows and say like, I was introduced to your stuff by your dad, like he taught me English, and like there's that song Never Get to Heaven. I remember like years ago that I remember he played us all, and we used to love that song. We used to ask him to play it all the time, and it was encounters like that made me kind of really remember that song and go, oh, maybe it's a good song. We kind of resurrected it, and in fact we tried to resurrect it a few times, I think, over the years of being Flyte, and it just never felt like it fitted in, or I don't know, it just felt like suddenly was the perfect album to put that song at the end as this sort of little epilogue, little eulogy, because obviously it's got nothing to do with the breakup or anything like that, but it just suddenly felt like it maybe did.
Thematically it's right.
It sounds right, doesn't it? We can pretend like we didn't dig it off the shelf.
Do you have anything from like back then when you were 14 in the album book that kind of relates to Never Get to Heaven? Did you manage to find any kind of pages or anything from a notebook?
No, I think I think it was, I was macroing it back then, just had it all in my head.
What is the kind of earliest thing in the album book? Is it all kind of taken from the period in which the record was formed, or have you managed to dive back in to find stuff that's relevant from a way bit longer back? Or
Losing You, which seems like the most present and like most relevant song on the album in a way, was actually written about actually when that relationship that I was writing about had ended temporarily, maybe 6-7 years previous. Then suddenly it felt really relevant again and brought it back and used that one. So that was really old, that one.
So the relationship ended and then returned?
Got back together, yeah.
Okay.
It was really like directed at her, that song. At that time I wrote it. And then this time around I really directed it at me. It completely flipped. So yeah. And I tried changing the me's to you's, or the you's to me's. It didn't quite work, so I just had to keep it that way. But yeah, it just felt really weirdly relevant.
That's another interesting thing about this record, is that I don't think there's any name checking on it the whole way through, in a way which the first album kind of, I think, almost half the songs I think kind of had names in the title.
Yeah, well, that was the idea of the first album. It was like supposed to be. We said kind of whilst making it that this should feel like a book that was about all this cast of characters, all these different people, Kathy and Archie and Victoria, and
very classical names as well, quite kind of timeless, or a little bit vintage maybe.
Yeah, Annie and Alistair. Annie and Alistair was code for AA, so about the 12-step program. So Sundays and Mondays with Annie and Alistair, as in going to AA on Sunday and Monday. And then weirdly as well, there was Annie and Alistair were two A&Rs at Island Records, our record company, who would get together on Sundays and Mondays to listen to the... So they were like, is it about us? That's so weird. But yeah, they were there's another one with a name on it, isn't there? Have I forgotten?
What did we say? Kathy, not. Archie, Annie, and
yeah, no, you're right. Like 50% of them have got
it's names. It's 5 or 6 of them, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Even though Archie Marry Me was an Always song, so not our one. I would never use the name Archie.
How come?
That's too posh. That's another thing too. I don't know. It's like, I think people also started thinking that we were kind of maybe like posher than we were, because I think people would be forgiven in thinking we were like from public school and quite like well-to-do posh people. And really not. We're very like boring, kind of lower middle class, kind of like state school, just middle of the road boringness. I think we just got maybe I just watched too many Richard Curtis films.
Join the club.
Just maybe I had too much like Hugh Grant in my ear or something like that. You know, I just ended up and I like reading Ponzi books and stuff. You know,
there is kind of a weird aversion to that in our generation to a certain extent, though. In some circles, it feels like that you kind of get looked at as a bit of a dick if you're, I don't know,
definitely
reading
growing
something
up as well. I think in the past it was worse. I think it's getting less bad maybe, but there was a real, like at my school, I remember I got like a lot of flack for having like a posh voice, but like a lot. And I was definitely like gravitated towards, I was definitely friends with like the more like working class people at the school. Like I definitely had a friend group that were from like pretty rough parts of town, and I think they were always like quite bemused by me. And I've actually got that real, and I grew up with a really strong sense of socialism and very anti-establishment kind of leanings, and I had a big chip on my shoulder about public school people and all this stuff. It's funny, but then in later life, for people to assume the complete opposite of me was always just like, oh, for fuck's sake, I didn't get any of the good education and I get all the prejudice.
I remember when I grew up in Aberdeenshire, I used to get the piss taken out of me for not having a particularly strong Scottish accent compared to other people in the area.
Right, where are you from?
Aberdeenshire, kind of up in the north.
Right, yeah, so that's over to the east, isn't it?
Yeah, northeast. But then when I went to Edinburgh and all my friends were English, I then got the piss taken out of me for having a Scottish accent.
Yeah.
So I can't win.
Well, you got a fairly like neutral, understandable Scottish accent. Some of my friends I've made up in, is more like Glasgow area, I suppose. That sometimes it's just, I need subtitles.
It's because they speak fast as well, though, and they just don't really bother.
Really fast and really thick, and there is a patois as well.
Yeah,
is kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty exclusive to the Glasgow area.
I think it's a thing though as well, though, isn't it? People want to be distinguished as being from Glasgow, or whatever.
Is Glasgow the cool? That's where you're right. Have you got a chip on your shoulder from being from near Aberdeen?
I feel lucky that I'm from Aberdeen because everybody in Edinburgh hates everybody in Glasgow, and everybody in Glasgow hates everybody in Edinburgh. And
you're kind of Swiss.
Aberdeen's so far away that nobody gives a fuck. So
yeah. Nice, you're on the fence. That's a safe place to be. Tell you what, where I really love to go in Scotland is Inverness.
Inverness is beautiful. Yeah, so
beautiful, and people there. Met some incredible people there.
Do you come up here and write quite a lot? You've been up
once
a few
or twice.
times, yeah.
Done that. Yeah, and I just love it. I love it in Scotland. I came up to Glasgow a lot at one point because my ex was an actor and she was shooting something in Glasgow, so I came up a lot there, and then we'd play up there a lot too. There are some great people I've met there. Even people who are coming to our shows, and we go to the like pub near the venue, and there'd be some people who were like, hey, we're going to come see you later, and we're like, oh, let's have a drink, and then ended up seeing them every time we've gone up to Glasgow. And just, I think they were like, before COVID started, there were vague plans of us going on this like big, taking a bunch of LSD and going on a big hike next time we're up there or something.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, well, it's the right combination, I think,
as long as it's not in the winter.
Yeah, that's true. I think in the summer though, it's riddled with mosquitoes. That sounds quite stressful as well.
It's a nightmare. Yeah, you got tons of midges if you go up into the Highlands. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know what the way around that is.
A beekeeper outfit.
Beekeeper, that's what I was going to say, yeah. Like a portable bed mosquito thingy. No, I love it up there. I've only played it in Aberdeen once.
Where'd you play?
That was, is it the Lemon Tree? Yeah.
Headliner or support?
No, it was a support. It was supporting Prides. That was the only time I saw Aberdeen, but it felt old and cobbled and quite nice.
Grey.
I must have seen the nice bit.
What we've spoken about a lot here, the way that this album has come from a dark place. Is it possible to be happy and creatively fulfilled at the same time? Well,
that's what I'm finding out now, to be honest. I'm in a very wonderful new relationship and very happy, and she's actually a musician as well, and we've been discussing that both because we both came from quite unhappy places. It's almost like I've got this fire underneath me. I've got this sort of the mission at hand is to make sure that I can stay happy and also be creatively successful. I really love the way the new material we're making now is shaping up already. It feels lovely and yellow and warm and full of positive energy rather than negative energy. Rather than, it's not exercising negative energy. It's exploring positive energy.
Yeah.
So let's wait and see.